It should be recording. If not, it will only live in our collective minds. Okay, so thank you all for coming. I'm very excited to kind of talk about my ambitious experience with Drupal. The rest is history. I've made a career switch from the humanities to Drupal. So this has been a kind of a crazy experience for me. And I just wanted to kind of share that with you and talk a little bit about a test case about building a nonprofit website. And so hopefully my experiences can, I don't know if illuminate, but at least like to share some camaraderie in this career change that I've made and how to build a website for a nonprofit with a limited budget, I would say. So, okay. So, as I said, my name's Jack Garratt. I work for Debug Academy. We are based out of Washington, D.C. area. We are locally owned and operated. We essentially kind of further train Drupal developers who are perhaps transitioning from like Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, or more likely, people like me who are making career changes coming from the humanities or bankers or mothers looking to build new skills. And so we do offer a part-time 3-month course in which you can learn these skills and kind of enter into an entry-level position if you put your heart into it, I'd like to say. So if you study, you can do it. Here's all the contact information in case you're interested. I'll try not to do any more pitch stuff here. But we do offer remote access to these courses, so you don't have to be in DC. Okay, so a little bit about me. Like I said, my name is Jack Garratt, and for the past 12 years, I have lived and breathed history. I was a history major in undergrad. I did German studies, and then I did a doctoral program at the George Washington University, and that took about like 8 years. And so if you want to know about German socialism, the German participation in the slave trade in Africa in the 19th century, Togo, come to me. However, once I graduated, the job prospects, I think, for a doctoral, someone coming out with a PhD and not wanting to adjunct for his whole life or for 5 to 10 years, that wasn't necessarily for me. So I decided to teach at a private high school for a year, and about halfway through, I kind of looked in the mirror and was like, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? And I was kind of like, no. I'm going to start studying web development. And this was last February, so a little over a year ago, I guess. And I started with the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then in June, I decided, okay, I can learn all these skills, but I need to put it into like a whole package. And so I enrolled in this Debug Academy course, and they were like, you'll learn Drupal. And I was like, what's Drupal? And so I was just like, all right, this sounds great. We get to work on a real project, and essentially I get to bring all these skills into like one little kind of package with a bow and contribute to projects. Get to work on a real web development team, and in my mind, that's hard to study for. And so that was kind of my training ground, and that's where I worked on this nonprofit website. And so that's kind of where I'm detailing this right now. So it's like 3 months in the summer of last summer to build this nonprofit site. So that's a little bit about me. If you're really curious at the end, you can ask more, but it's been a crazy ride to say the least. So I'm going to talk a little bit about building the American Relief Coalition for Syria's website and how we did it with a bunch of students. This is kind of the top part of the website of the new design. There's like a little slideshow and whatnot. And of course, most importantly, the donate button in the top right-hand corner. So, important questions that you might want to think about, or at least I tried to think about for this presentation, is, kind of, are small websites with limited budgets feasible in Drupal 8? Not to let the cat out of the bag, but yes, but being flexible is important. What skills and technologies did students need to learn to be able to build a website? And to be able to work on a whole web development team, there was a lot to kind of bring new learners up to speed. And having done this since then with newer students, it takes a lot of work. And then finally, from the client experience, what was better in Drupal 8? Was it worthwhile to take this Drupal 7 site to Drupal 8? And I think most importantly, at least from the client perspective, they got to test drive the layout builder. And so did they like it? What were the quirks of using the layout builder, I should say. I see some nods. Yes, there are definitely quirks, and you have to learn to live with its limitations, but the clients seem to like it. Okay. So this slide talks a little bit about the ARCs, or the American Relief Coalition for Syria, and its site. So they are a coalition of various organizations that support a number of projects in Syria and outside Syria. So they will do projects helping have Syrians access to water, food, and clothing, healthcare, providing services to women, but also kind of promoting awareness of Syrians within our own communities. So for example, they were highlighting kind of Syrian contributions to my hometown in Ellicott City near Baltimore, where there was flooding and such, more local news, but nevertheless, we were trying to implement a new design for them, and they were actually really flexible in this. So what did the old site have? It had a slideshow at the top. The site mainly was just to have articles, blog posts, press releases, and essentially a donate form. It wasn't really an intensive website, which is great for students. You don't want to have lots of content types and lots of custom functionality for us to be working on. Like I said, the content types were largely straightforward. The two ones that we kind of worked on most were the projects content type, and this would have a kind of latitude and longitude, and you could place them on a map, and a taxonomy of what kind of projects they were, so whether they were for clothing or hygiene, etc. And so we had to deal a little bit with that. And then this last point is the old site was tentatively responsive. So my favorite example is, because I worked on this part, was the footer. As you would make it smaller and smaller, all the styling would break all over the place, and I was like, okay, well, I'll try to make that better. So these were some of the concerns in the existing site of arcssyria.org, if you're curious. All right, so that was the site. Who were we? Or who are we, I guess we should also say. So for this 3-month course, we had about 13 students, and most of us were new to Drupal, though there were some who were Drupal 7 developers looking to bone up their knowledge and to make that jump to Drupal 8, and they wanted this course to familiarize themselves with its uniqueness. And then our teacher, for what it's worth, has the Drupal Grandmaster certification, and essentially would just do quality control as we made the website and kind of made our pull requests and things. But what we learned and when. The first month, most of the students learned what I would say the basics, but that doesn't mean easy. I would say they're the essentials. So working in the command line, Git, responsive design, HTML, and CSS. And then the second month is really when we finally dove into Drupal and put it all together and learned site building, custom theming. And at this point, like where it says, this is when we started the project. And the bulk of these students, this is when we jumped off. We're like, okay, let's start implementing the theme and putting the site together. The third month is when some of the other Drupal 7 developers were like, okay, now it's time for us, learn custom module development and do the migration. And so this is where, as I was learning web development, it was going way over my head. And I was like, okay, this is pretty challenging right now. So I was very comfortable in the custom theming section, but that's changing as I get more used to more Drupal development. Right. So, what changes were needed in the redesign? So, like I said, we needed to do a migration of the database. We were going to add the layout builder because the client, this is something, you know, as a fairly new kind of developer to Drupal, there's this paragraphs module, and the client did not like building pages with the paragraphs module. And so we said, we demoed the layout builder for them. They're like, this is great. And so that's what we planned to do, and that's what we did in this site. We wanted to add a Google Maps page that displayed project nodes, that had custom map markers based on a taxonomy, and then you had an exposed filter in which you could kind of sort the projects based on what project it was. And then, like I said, clean up the website, make it more responsive, and then add a contact form. All right. So, what was this process like? I almost want to just like skip down to the bottom and be like I was ripping out my hair, even though it was a fairly smooth process. But we had this own proprietary software in which there was a bunch of tickets, right? This is me learning this process of web design, in which these tickets would be assigned to various students, and then we would just implement and do that task. So it might be as simple as, you know, style the footer or something like that, or place the menu blocks in the footer. And then we would export our configurations and submit pull requests, and then that's essentially how we slowly built out this website. This point, so I said the students, there were about 13. At the end of the day, about 5 of us put together the whole site. And so, something to keep in mind in terms of like the size of a team to put together this nonprofit. But the process, I remember doing my first task, and I don't know if this really rings any bells with people as they started on their first project, if you will, but I remember like installing a module, and I was like sweating because I was like, this is going to actually be on the website. So it was a big intense moment for me, but I could see how it might not seem so intense right now. All right. So the next few slides are a little bit of the pieces that I put together for the ARCS site. These are views. So there was a views page that would display little snippets of blog posts. And this is kind of where I actually learned that you could customize like the HTML output in a views module. I was kind of struggling with that initially, and then my teacher was like, oh, you can do this. And I was like, why didn't you tell me that before? But this was one of the things that, to me, I was very proud of, was putting together some of these views pages. The second part, and this took a little bit of time, is this is the aforementioned Google Maps page. And what the client wanted was that we had our content type projects, and that had all the various projects they supported. And they wanted this, the Google Maps page with these custom, map marker icons, and you'd be able to click them, and then you actually have an NT reference, or I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, in which all of the information was displayed from that project. And then you could filter it based on the exposed filter. And this took a really long time, mainly because I was trying to learn the Geolocation Field Module and using Google Maps API keys and understanding Drupal documentation. Even when it's well done, it still takes me a while to do it and put it all together. But that was kind of one of the moments that Drupal clicked with me, is that, oh, I can actually start doing some kind of interesting things and put together, I think a nice website for a client, and have all of this information be manipulated in interesting ways.
So this was a view? Yes.
And geolocation, did you use the leaflet as well? Or no?
I did not use leaflet. I looked at it, but I just used the Geolocation Field Module. But leaflet is something that I actually wanted to look into because it pops up a lot whenever, but I just haven't had the time to learn it a little bit. And this last little bit is creating custom components or custom block types for the layout builder. We had the design given to us, and I realize these snapshots aren't the greatest, but I think they do show something. So if you're the client, you know, you just have these basic blocks here. So button block, heading block, long text block. The media block is where you could do Vimeo or YouTube videos, and that was just the remote video module, or I forget, the name's escaping me. And so they could just post videos and it's automatically responsive. And then there's this quote block, and we were just styling these, and so the client could just input some text into 2 fields, and you get this little quote block, you know, the rock salt font. And then you could place them wherever you want. The tricky thing, and something that I'm still learning, is adding padding and margin and trying to guess how the client is going to use these blocks to create these pages, which I'm still working on as a developer, but they seem very happy with it, so I was happy with it. Okay, all right. So I realize I'm not particularly demoing this website right now, but I wanted to reflect a little bit on some of those questions I posed very early on. No worries, I have a thicker skin than that. How to turn, that meant in the very light-hearted. So how to determine whether a small website was really feasible. And the first point for me is, the sense that I got is like there's an ongoing discussion of whether Drupal is like kind of leaving these smaller sites behind. The sense that I get, and someone can disabuse me of that notion, that would be actually a really interesting conversation. But I wasn't really aware of that, so I was like, yes, let's build this website for them and see what happens. Our project manager just simply broke down the project into suitable tasks. And since this was done through a class, it was essentially like, okay, now you have to just use a custom twig template and you just go from there. So you just have to make some of those logical leaps. And as I've worked on a few more projects since this, I feel like this third point has become really important to me. So having an understanding, that a site is going to be built by students, but also the client is kind of responsive to some of the limitations and how much time things take. Thankfully, the Parks people were great about this. That I'm still learning and kind of making my way through learning all of this. But doing it for a nonprofit and having them being receptive to what is involved in making this project, I think is really important. So that communication aspect, to me, really helped. So, what skills did we need to learn? And I kind of I put them into 3 groups. I think this is somewhat arbitrary, but I think it's useful. Is, of course, you had to learn your basic site building skills, your views, custom block types, incorporating the layout builder when it was released towards the end of this project. But this is where most of our students, and what I kind of had to really struggle with, to really kind of put in my mind, to really get that into my muscle memory, was understanding Git workflow so we could actually collaborate. So all the students could collaborate as a team, and understanding the differences between Git and GitHub and making pull requests. These things come up all the time with our students. Learning custom theming and twig templates, and then of course, setting up local environments and troubleshooting them when they inevitably break. So that was certainly more of the advanced skills, but I think from my mind, that's how learning those, I was able to contribute to a meaningful project. And then I didn't really touch this, but that was the Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 migration. We learned about it, and I saw it being done, but that was a little tougher for me. So that's something I want to work towards. All right. The last little part here is what was better from the client perspective, and for them it was just using the layout builder. Like I said, the paragraph structure was a little tough for them, and so when we showed them the various block types and we could give them that flexibility within a sandbox, or with a sandbox and some limitations, then they were generally good to go. So I spent maybe an hour or two with some of their interns and kind of training them not only how to place blocks, but how to kind of hack the layout builder. Like, you just provide some extra spacing here. The Bootstrap 3 theme didn't really like the layout builder, so you have to open up this in a new tab. And so it wasn't the best experience, but they liked it, so I was like, okay. And then, of course, they have their Drupal 8 site, which is going to last, I think, from what I understand, it has kind of a longer term kind of security kind of updates. So, but yeah, so that is a very quick wrap up of a little bit about me, how to make a nonprofit site and what goes into it from a bunch of new students putting it together. So hopefully that was interesting. There was a lot to take in and a lot of information. So thank you very much for listening. And this was a great experience for me doing my first presentation at the Drupal Camp. So I think there's just like 1 or 2 minutes left for questions, but.
Okay, I don't want to hog them all. So, did you use a methodology for your development, like waterfall or agile, or did you just have task lists and just go off of?
So yeah, so from what I understand is like agile is waterfall is like you have the whole project and then you launch and you get all of the various features, but sort of. But essentially we wanted, here are the must-haves, and we were going to implement those, and then if we get the others, great.
Feature-driven.
Yeah.
FTD.
So that was kind of the approach that our team, the Debug team took, was that these are the must-haves for the clients, and then if we can develop these, then great. However, certain limitations, budget, and length of project. So, because once that semester ends, it's like 1 or 2 people now working on it rather than 5 people. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the local environment that you guys use to set up your projects?
So what we did is we set up a virtual box and we used Debug or Drupal VM. Yeah, I was still trying to learn all of these things. And set them up across all of our students' machines. And that worked well, so we just had to kind of just set that up. So it was like running Vagrant up and then doing all of that with the virtual machines and then troubleshooting them if it's a Windows machine or not, if it's a Mac. And sometimes that works well, and then if that's fairly resource intensive, so if that didn't work, and this was actually for me, because I had a whole laptop, we had a remote developer kind of set up. So that's what we did.
Yeah.
You said you had, was it one teacher for the whole group? Okay.
Mhm.
And were they the project manager as well?
No, so there was actually, he was, I think he and the project manager kind of set up all the various tasks or stories, if you will.
Okay.
But then the project manager kind of then started divvying up all of that. But I think they collaboratively worked together.
This is very similar to what we do at DePaul with our capstone class. We do, our seniors do 2 quarters, so 20 weeks. we have nonprofits come in, we do a website. We do
Yeah, it was a great experience, and it was something that I knew getting into web development, I could make all of the greatest, little personal projects, but if it was for someone else, a real project that felt like I could, kind of actually launch my career.
Felt good, didn't it?
Yeah, it was nice. So, all right, I'm getting the nod, so thank you again very much.